Enough. That is the word on the new cover of Time magazine, which lists the locations of the 253 mass shootings in America so far this year. That is more than 250 incidents of gun violence, and we're only 220 days into 2019. Joining me, two writers with pieces in this new edition of Time magazine, Pulitzer Prize-winning presidential historian and MSNBC contributor, my friend Jon Meacham, and columnist for Time magazine, David French. They both wrote a piece for this really important cover story. Jon, I turn to you first. Your piece is entitled "The Power of a President's Words." You say a president is supposed to set the tone, and the president isn't meeting that challenge. Is it that he's not meeting that challenge, or he is setting a tone, but it's a tone of division?
I think that's right. I think he is falling far, far short of what Franklin Roosevelt called making the presidency a place, preeminently a place of moral leadership. Words have consequences. When you say things, sometimes that leads to unspeakable acts. And I think that the presidency, from the very beginning, John Adams wrote in the 1790s that the president would be the object of all eyes, the object of all attention. John Kennedy said it was this vital center of action. It's always been this central place in our culture and our politics. We can argue whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it happens to be historically true. And right now we have a president who appeals to the darker forces as opposed to our better angels.
Jon, you also write this: Trump's failure to do much more than tweet over the weekend of the attack, followed by his listless and unconvincing remarks about hate in a speech most notable for its implicit defense of guns, stands in stark contrast to other presidents in other moments of crisis. We heard that contrast yesterday from candidates like Cory Booker, from Joe Biden. But help me understand historically the power base of America, why so many are standing with the president and saying his policies work when this massively important tone in how he leads this country seems to be falling short.
Look, the story of the country is we get it right at the very last minute and just barely at every point.
Why?
I was thinking this morning, because we're human beings and we live in a fallen and sinful and incomplete world. The Constitution was written predicated on the assumption that we would get things wrong. The reason it's so hard to get anything done is that they believed we would do the wrong thing quickly. And so at least what James Madison was trying to do, as he put it, was make ambition counteract ambition, keep things where we could always be struggling. A republic is only as good as the sum of its parts. Its parts are human. And so it puts an immense burden on every citizen to enable the better things to happen. If we didn't do, my favorite example of this is we did not declare war on the Third Reich until the Third Reich declared war on us. After Pearl Harbor, it took 5 days for us to get into the European war. That's how strong the forces of isolationism were in this country. And so and I'm not saying therefore the bad stuff is fine, but it's not a partisan point. It's a historically based point that the struggle is to get to doing the right thing 51% of the time. And if we can get there, we'll have an era we're proud of. If we stay where we are now, we're going to have an era that, as Vice President Biden said, we hope it's an aberration, but it may not be.
I guess it's amazing that we never seem to learn from history. David, in your piece, you say this is bigger than Trump, and that it is imperative that we recognize the symptoms of white supremacy, the language, the ideas, and banish it back into the irrelevant margins of American life. How can we do that when the president continues to support these ideas? 2 nights ago, the biggest primetime conservative news program's host told the millions of viewers, many good people in their homes, that white supremacy is a hoax.
Well, that's why I'm saying it's an issue beyond Trump. I mean, we immediately are able to point to other voices who are out there.
And why are they doing it?
This alt-right movement began before Trump. One of the points that I made in my piece is it burst onto the scene with Trump, but the seeds were there for a long time, and the seeds will continue afterwards, because the ideas that it advances are not necessarily centered around the person of Donald Trump. The ideas existed before, the ideas will exist afterwards, and they have utilized online communities, the same kinds of tactics that you saw to mobilize and radicalize young men with ISIS. While you don't have some sort of an ISIS of white supremacy, you have the kinds of message boards, you have the kinds of messaging directed at young men that predated Trump and will postdate Trump. And one of the points that I made in my piece is a lot of this began to worm its way into the larger conservative media in a really troubling way. We can't forget that Steve Bannon.
Why would conservative media allow that? Are those the views of conservatives across the United States? I'm pretty sure they're not yours.
No, one of the things you have to understand is that a lot of these alt-right views were actually held by members of conservative media. And so when Steve Bannon says Breitbart, which at the time when he said this was, I believe, the #2 most highest trafficked website in conservative media, is the platform for the alt-right. That was not simply a Trumpist phenomenon. This was part of the Bannon view that he's going to remake politics. And one of the things that the alt-right did is it fixated on immigration. And so it doesn't go to the conservative public and say, oh, we don't like immigration because they're, because they're Mexican. What they'll say is, I'm going to tell you something the left won't tell you, or I'm going to be not politically correct right now. And then they'll make arguments about immigrants that are just false, and advance this sort of alt-right point of view that ethnicity and nationality and ethnicity and culture are inseparable.
Then, Jon Meacham, what if this is who we are? You often say this isn't who we are. What if it is?
No, I don't say. I say when you say it's not who we are, don't say that, because it is. It is. And I don't know if I can quickly ask David a question here. At what point what's the delineation? Where's the tipping point between the right and the alt-right? When did that, do you think, was it the rise of Trump where it tips over? And how does the right get it back?
Well, the alt-right existed before Trump and latched onto him very emphatically. The tipping point between the right and the alt-right is you can tell somebody is alt-right because in the alt-right, nationality and ethnicity, or culture and ethnicity, are deemed to be inseparable. Whenever you begin to hear those arguments, you're hearing, oh, that's alt-right.
Well, Jon Meacham, whenever my guests ask questions better than I do, then I end the segment.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.